The moving assembly line forever changed the way automobiles are made. The $5 a day pay brought employees in for Ford Motor Company and provided a workforce to support this new method of building cars. Hi, I'm Ken Smith, and this video is about the moving assembly line and the $5 a day workday. A brief overview of how Henry Ford changed how cars were assembled and how the 5-day, 40-hour week came to be. A common myth is that Henry Ford invented the automobile, and this actually is not true. While he may not have invented the automobile, he did offer an improved way of manufacturing a large number of vehicles for the masses. This method of production was the moving assembly line. Now, while Ransom Olds invented the automobile assembly line, Henry Ford perfected it. The most common feature of Ford's assembly line was the use of the conveyor belt. The belts were in use with other industries, including slaughterhouses. Moving the product to the workers seemed like a better use of time and resources. The Ford Motor Company had decided to try to implement the moving assembly line in the automobile manufacturing process. After much trial and error, in 1913, Henry Ford and his employees successfully began using the innovation of the moving assembly line at the Highland Park Assembly Plant. What made this assembly line so unique was the movement element. You see, Henry Ford famously remarked that the use of the moving assembly line allowed for the work to be taken to the workers rather than the workers moving to and from and around the vehicles being assembled. The vehicle began to be pulled down the line and built step by step. At first it was pulled by a rope, and later it became a simple moving chain mechanism. The new process made it so that the Model T was now built in only 92 minutes. Yet while the work of assembling an automobile was now simplified, employees began to leave the Ford Motor Company to work for their competitors. The reason was employees found the assembly line work extremely boring, as they were now doing only one or two tasks, and instead of working to build an entire vehicle, they were only assembling one or two parts or making one or two parts. Additionally, employees did not like the strict timing that the moving assembly line required. It was difficult to make sure you completed all of your work before the car moved down the line to its next station. Cars invariably would end up missing parts, or employees could end up falling over each other while putting the car together. This created an extremely ineffective and dangerous situation. Beginning in 1914, Ford made the stunning announcement that he was raising the minimum wage in his factories to $5 a day. That was twice the standard industry rate, and by implementing this price along with implementing an 8-hour workday, which at that time 10 to 16-hour workdays were quite the norm. This drastic move made business sense, he argued. Higher wages would reduce worker turnover, attract better employees, and create new customers for consumer goods like automobiles. Reducing daily work hours would lessen fatigue-induced mistakes, thereby raising employee productivity and efficiency. Henry Ford also hoped that the overall popularity of these new measures would allow him to continue running his factories unencumbered by either unions or minimum wage and maximum hour laws. The $5 workday involved profit-sharing payments that would more than double the employee's daily wage, raising it to a maximum of $5. It was widely believed that this drastic move would quickly bankrupt Ford Motor Company. But the exact opposite occurred. Mechanics and potential employees from around the country headed to Detroit, Michigan in pursuit of these high wages. Henry Ford stated that he believed in making 25,000 men prosperous and content rather than follow the plan of making a few slave drivers for established multi-millionaire business owners. These new higher wages, however, came with conditions attached. The pay increase was initially a bonus of $2.70, added to the $2.30 daily base pay. To qualify for this bonus, workers had to stay sober, contribute to a savings account, maintain a clean home, and refrain from domestic abuse. Not only did Henry Ford increase the wages of his employees, but he also decreased the number of hours they were responsible for working. Henry Ford decreased the shifts by 1 hour and gave employees higher wages. The shift length decreased allowed Ford to create a third shift and hire more workers. This new shift process allowed Ford Motor Company to become a 24-hour operation. Fordism also grew out of the moving assembly line. Fordism refers to large-scale production combined with higher wages, and it spread to other industries following the $5 day that was started by Ford Motor Company. This move by Ford was followed by other companies and changed the business and manufacturing world across the globe as employees began to seek out jobs that came with higher wages and shorter hours. An important outcome of the salary increases was also seen in the production. As efficiencies increased on the moving assembly line, it also helped to drop the price of the Model T. In 1908, the car sold for $825. But by 1925, that same type of automobile was being produced and sold for just $260, making the car more affordable to individuals around the world. Most especially, it allowed employees of Ford Motor Company to be able to afford the very product that they had built. But our story doesn't end here. Many of these workers worked grueling hours and 6-day work weeks. However, Henry Ford saw yet another major opportunity to increase employee satisfaction and loyalty, which in turn would increase employee production. In 1926, the founder of Ford Motor Company took his 6-day-a-week operation down to 5 days per week, with no changes in employee compensation. He believed doing so would make his workers more productive and more inclined to spend money during their downtime. With days off, employees would have more time for leisure activities and shopping, spending their earnings, perhaps on vehicles. This landmark change made Ford one of the first companies in the nation to set the standard of a 5-day work week. The 5-day, 40-hour work week eventually became part of the American labor law, partly due to Henry Ford and the decision to make this happen in his factory. Every man, said Edsel Ford, the founder's son, needed more than 1 day a week for rest and recreation. When President Franklin D. Roosevelt was elected in 1932, the nation was in the throes of the Great Depression. Unemployment was at 25%, 1 in every 4 Americans were out of work. To meet this incredible challenge, FDR appointed Frances Perkins as his Secretary of Labor. Perkins was the first female cabinet member in U.S. history and a committed workers' rights advocate. Together with allies in Congress, FDR and Perkins passed the National Industrial Recovery Act in 1933. The sweeping New Deal legislation addressed the most pressing labor issues of the day. It established a federal minimum wage of $12 to $15 a week. It prohibited child labor younger than 16 years old and capped the work week at 40 hours. But the trailblazing labor law didn't survive. In 1935, the Supreme Court struck down the National Industrial Recovery Act as unconstitutional. Perkins and FDR spent the next 3 years fighting the courts and critics in Congress to claw back the gains that were lost. A major victory came in 1936 with the Public Contracts Act, a law that required most federal contractors to adhere to a 40-hour work week. Finally, in 1938, FDR and Perkins was able to push through the Fair Labor Standards Act. The original version of the law capped the work week at 44 hours. It also created the first federal rules for overtime pay. Any hours worked beyond 44 must be compensated at 1.5 times the regular hourly rate. The FLSA stipulated that the work week would be reduced to 42 hours after 1 year and then 40 hours after 2 years. The 40-hour, 5-day work week has been the standard in America ever since. I hope you enjoyed the video. Have a wonderful day, and most of all, y'all be blessed.